Ubeng, not Esther Ubeng. Okay.
Sorry,
Hi. What did you say?
come again with the name. I didn't get the pronunciation right.
I said it's Esther Ubeng.
Ubeng, okay.
Okay, thank you very much for the short intro. And yes, thank you, Abu Vito, for being here. Thanks everyone for taking our time to join this session. I hope that at the end of the day, we'd all have deep insights into what Scrum is for those of us that and for those of us that already know what the term is and already know what a Scrum Master is and already know the impact of Scrum, we're going to be able to, implement it in the right way. I believe I made a slide for that as well. All right, so I'm going to be sharing my screen in a moment. Please let me know once you can see my screen. And everyone see my screen.
Yes.
Yes, we can see it now. Yes, it's up.
Thank you very much. All right, so we're going to be talking about the impact of Scrum on product teams. And okay, who's that? I don't think I can see the meeting session. So if you have any questions, just drop your question in the chat box, or you can take a note down, and when we're done, we're going to, I believe we have 20 minutes for questions in this session. So I'm going to use 40 minutes to just briefly run through my slides and talk deeply about what the impact of Scrum on product teams is. And so, yeah, the impact of Scrum on product teams. So first of all, we're going to be running through what Scrum is. I believe someone said she doesn't know what the meaning of Scrum is and she would like to know the advantages and disadvantages. Unfortunately, I didn't highlight the disadvantages, but I think at the end of this session, I'm going to say one or two disadvantages that I know of on Scrum. We're going to be talking about what impact Scrum has on product team, Scrum roles, run briefly on Scrum processes, Scrum events, and implementing Scrum correctly. All right, so let's dive in. Scrum is one of the agile methodologies we have. I believe we have Scrum, we have Kanban, we have Lean, we have Scrumban, and a host of many others. But for this session, we are going to just focus on one methodology, which is Scrum, and which is one of the most popular agile framework most fintechs use in their product development lifecycle. So yeah, Scrum is an adaptive, iterative, fast, flexible, and effective framework designed to deliver significant value quickly and throughout a project. I'm going to explain more in the next slide, right? And it is a framework within which people can address complex adaptive problems while productively and creatively delivering products of the highest possible value. All right. So I'm going to be touching base on this pictorial representation of what Scrum is and Agile as a whole. So first of all, let me talk about this, right? Now, let's top of our head, let's have two different companies, two different types of companies, right? Top of our head. One uses Scrum methodology, one uses waterfall methodology, which is a traditional project management methodology, right? Now, hardware companies are the ones that mostly use waterfall methodology, right? Few fintechs use Scrum, or most fintechs use Scrum. So now let's have two companies top of our head, right? One uses Scrum and one doesn't, right? The company that doesn't use Scrum, let's say they use waterfall methodology. Basically, let's use companies that develop cars. For example, case in point, Innocent Motors, they use waterfall methodology. And before they start developing, they already know they've already done their research, right? They've gotten feedback from their users and all on what they want the next model to look like. And they've done all their business analysis, requirements, doc, and all that. And they've drafted out how they want the product to look like, pertaining to what they've gotten from users, right? The moment they start developing or working on that new carb model, they do not get feedbacks from users. They do not add to the requirements. They do not add anything to the spec. They just go with the flow from start to finish with exactly the defined spec they've had from the start. And most times when these companies are done producing what the users actually want, they find out that there were some things they did not take note of at the end of the whole project that they've worked on. So what they do, people that use that methodology, is that they improve on the next model, right? But this company that uses Scrum, they've gotten their specifications, done their market analysis, competitive analysis, market research, done their business analysis, everything they need to do, all the documentations and requirements, big business requirements they need done, specs broken down, epics broken down into user stories, and they start building the product, right? Now, these people that use Scrum, or let me use this company that uses Scrum, first of all, they would work on bringing out a minimum viable product, which is an MVP, right? Now, once that comes out, the users use the product, make use of the product, they get feedback from the users, and then they iterate or improve on what they've already worked on, you know. And before they get the whole product that they wanted to build, because an MVP does not have or does not contain the entire features a product is meant to have. An MVP is something that is really minimal but useful for the users. It's supposed to add value to the users, but yet still meeting the need it's meant to meet, right? So while the minimum viable product is being used by users, they're improving on it, and they're improving on it. Case in point, WhatsApp. WhatsApp was not what we have now. WhatsApp, I don't think we were able to send voice notes when WhatsApp first version came up, or send videos or send pictures, right? But along the line, they keep improving on it and releasing new updates that you have to go to your App Store or your Google Play Store and improve on, right? So now, Scrum gives room for change. Scrum helps accommodate change. Scrum is flexible. You can actually, for example, let's say when the regulation on B2C came about, right? Let's say a company was trying to go into the crypto market, right? And they were already building their MVP product, their MVP, their minimum viable product already. And the ban on crypto in Nigeria happened. If that company is actually using Scrum, they would be able to adjust their product vision or the product goal, or they'll be able to add some other things to their product that will slightly move away from crypto. Maybe embody USD payments or payments with crypto, or they would be able to make changes to the product. I don't know if you guys get what I'm trying to say. But let's say the company was using Waterfall. They would have to bring out that product at the end of the day. It is useless because crypto is no longer really allowed, right? So I don't know if you got what I just said, but Scrum is actually very useful in the sense that it allows for change. It's flexible. You can actually get feedback. You can improve on what you've worked on, right? You can always continuously get feedback from your users and produce a product that meets exactly their spec, a product that adds the exact value that the users want, that meets their need. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about this image now. So Scrum Agile is an iterative methodology as well, in the sense that, for example, you want to produce a Benz, right? For every single product or every single phase or every single version you release into the market, it adds value to your users. For example, you want to release a Benz. Let's say this is our Benz, really fine looking Benz, and you've met with the CEO, and the CEO has given you what he wants. Oh, look, we want to produce a Benz. How can we do this? And we want to use the agile Scrum methodology, right? First of all, minimum viable product, like I said, a minimum viable product is something that doesn't have all the features that you're supposed to give your users, doesn't embody everything, all the requirements, but the little that it has, it adds value and it meets the exact need, right? So first of all, you want to release a Benz into the market. First of all, you start with a skateboard. A skateboard does not give the luxury that a Benz would give, but at least it can move you from a point A to a point B, right? So in some sense, it adds value, right? And once you put that out in the market, you get feedback from your users, right? And you improve on it. And the next version you're releasing is a scooter. And from a scooter to a bicycle, from a bicycle to a motorbike, from a motorbike to a Benz. Now that is an iterative development. That is an incremental development, right? For example, let's say you wanted to release a Benz, and then the first thing you're releasing to the market is a tire. The next thing you're releasing is two tire and a stick in the middle. The next one is a car without a roof. What about the rain and all that? Basically, before you even release the main product, the users, your market, the users that would have used your product would have already cancelled you guys. Like that company, don't even try, they don't have sense. They don't know what they're doing. How can you release tire into the market? How can it doesn't add value, blah, blah, blah. But then when you're using Scrum and you're using the incremental development approach, every single product you put into the market adds value, right? And also I want to talk about the iterative development. So, like I said, you've met with the CEO and the CEO gives you the spec of what he wants. He has shown you the vision of the company, the goal, and what he wants to achieve with the company, right? First of all, you do your own bit by doing your market research, doing your competitive analysis, checking if if that market, if there is a market team, I mean the product manager is in place, your engineers are in place, your product designers are in place, UX writer maybe, UX designer maybe. There are some companies that don't have those. There are some companies that do have those. So you guys have a meeting and plan, right? Then decide on the design. After planning phase, you have the design phase. This is where there's a lot of back and forth. Oh, I want the CTA button here. I want the login button here. I want this button here, this button here. And you guys decide on how exactly the design is going to be. And the design is approved. The next step is you tell the developers, this is what I want to be done, which is the development phase. They develop it, and then they move over to the testing phase, and then they deploy it. And then the beta tester that you have selected to test out the product for the MVP, right? They test it and you get feedback, which is the review phase. You improve on the feedback they worked on. And then you launch into the market, which is the MVP product, right? And then the cycle goes on, and the cycle goes on. So Agile Scrum is basically iterative. That is what I mean by iterative. This is iterative. You improve on what you've done previously. You retrospect. How did we do? What did we not do well? How can we achieve what we want? How can we improve on what we already have, right? And then you implement it, go again. It's a circle. It's a repeating circle, right? So let me not spend too much time here. I'm going to move back to the next slide. So yeah, advantages of Scrum. There's room for continuous feedback. You always have room for continuous feedback from your users. If it is an internal product, you always get feedback from your stakeholders on how they are using the product, basically. So there's always room for continuous improvement on the product. Like I said, iterative development, which will actually help you to bring out a good product. Continuous delivery of value, like I said in the other slide, sustainable pace, early delivery of high value. So now I want to say something about this early delivery of high value. For example, We all remember when we couldn't use our debit card to pay for iTunes subscriptions or shop online in dollars and all that. Now, for example, let's say we have two companies again in this instance. One company uses any agile, doesn't even use any methodology, not even waterfall at this point. They just implement. They just want to bring out the whole product at once. That's the product in its entire glory at once. And this company uses Scrum. This company just aims at bringing out. Okay, that would be waterfall, anyways. Bringing out the entire product, the finished product at once. Now, and this is a competitive market, right? Nobody can use their Naira card to pay to make dollar payments. Now, who do you think would actually bring out a product that will actually add value to users, that will solve users' needs of being able to make dollar payments? People that use Scrum. Why? Because they're going to start working on the MVP, prioritizing all the things that would make the MVP functional, right? Functional and meeting the need that the users want, which is being able to use the card to make dollar payments. Now, after their first release, these guys are not even halfway in producing the whole product. Remember that they want to produce the entire product with its entire full features. They are basically going to spend 2 years trying to bring out that product. Now, these guys have already used, let's say, not less than 3 months to bring out an MVP, right? Or 2 months, 3 months. It depends on how effective the team is, and it depends on the resources. Now, they've been able to use 2 months, 3 months to bring out that product, which is a virtual dollar card, a product that has a virtual dollar card that you can use to make dollar payments anywhere in the world, right? And then these guys are still halfway. By that 3 months, they're still halfway trying to bring out a full product. These guys are going to begin to make returns on investment. They're going to start making revenues way before these guys will release the whole product. By the time these guys release the whole product, these guys are already in their second release, right? They're already in their third release. Maybe they're already in their second release, or already working on their third release. So it helps you add value or deliver high value to the customers early. That is one advantage of Scrum. Now, another one is efficient development process, right? Motivation. Motivation in the sense that by the time the MVP is out and your beta testers are already testing the product before the proper launch, right? You guys are already seeing what value your product is adding. That is, at that point, the joy in your heart, right? And it's even more better when users start to use your product. And you begin to see your product everywhere on the screens of Lagos, of Nigeria. Oh, use this card for dollar payments. You're already seeing on people's status. Oh, this has come to solve our issues. I remember when Cheaper Cash helped some people, like helped them because of their rate. But I mean, already these guys are already making the money. They're already out there before you now bring yours. So at the time you're now bringing yours, you're now trying to compete in that market that these guys have already taken charge of, right? So like I was saying, motivation in this case, your team is already motivated to do more. They're already motivated to put in more energy to bring out something, an improved version of what is already there. Case in point, USD account numbers. You can save, you can generate US account numbers for your users. Those are improvements, right? So faster problem resolution, effective deliverables, customer centric. Why? Because you're always getting feedback from your users. High trust environment, collective ownership. All right, so I'm going to be diving into the next thing. What impact does Scrum have on product teams? First of all, it improves collaboration within the team. This is one very essential impact that Scrum can have on your team if you're implementing Scrum properly, right? Sometimes, as Scrum Masters, we need to know that it is actually people over processes. Sometimes, and I'm going to establish that fact down the line. All right, so improved collaboration. So Scrum encourages cross-functional collaboration and self-organization within a team, right? The roles in Scrum, including the product owner, Scrum Master, development team promotes clear responsibilities and foster effective teamwork. Now, regular ceremonies like sprint planning, daily stand-ups, sprint review, retrospectives help facilitate communication, knowledge sharing, and collective problem solving, which results in improved collaboration and team dynamics. It will get to a point down the line after you've implemented Scrum in your team. It will get to a point that they don't need to come to you for everything. They're already what's the word? Self-organized, right? They're already self-organized. They already have they already take ownership and accountability for their task. In short, for the product alone, they already own the product. Sense of ownership, right? In the sense that it gets to a point whereby your team, your Scrum team, you guys are deliberating on a feature you want to add to your product, and your engineers are actually seeing the issues you might have in future if you use a particular method, and they are suggesting another method. They're even collaborating among themselves. How can we work on this project? They're doing research. They're coming up with ideas. I'm meeting you. Can this work? Can this work? Can this? What do you think? Would this give you what you want? You know, that is actually an amazing team to be among, where everybody is involved, right? So I'm going to touch on some roles that make up the Scrum team, right? But let me talk about the core roles and non-core roles, right? So we have two different roles. We have core roles and non-core roles. Now, the core roles are basically made of the product, of the product owner, the Scrum Master, and the development team. Now, in some companies like mine, the product manager is usually the product owner. They are two different things. Some people mistake product owners as product managers. No, they are two different roles. They are two entirely different roles, right? But in some companies, product owners are product managers. And I would not say it's really effective in the sense that this is why I'm saying this, because product managers are supposed to be more concerned about how to, grow the product, strategies on how to take the products from point A to point B, should be more involved in research, finding out better ideas and ways to actually make the product stand out among different products. Now, the product manager should not be concerned about what is in the backlog or what is on Jira, what's on Trello, what is on ClickUp or whatever tool you use, right? A product manager should not even be concerned about looking at sprints. What the product manager should be concerned about is how to really, really grow that product, strategies, and every research necessary to be done, right? While a product owner is the one that is the product owner is basically the voice of the users, the voice of the customers. Is always getting feedback from customers, always getting feedbacks from customer stakeholders. The product owner is the one that prioritizes the backlog, right? The product owner is the go-to person if you have for the engineers, if they have any questions on maybe the tasks they've been assigned or the tasks they picked up to work on and they don't have clarity. The product owner they actually go to for clarifications. So the product owner is actually the one that is actually focused on the development phase of the product. That is the sprints and all that, the sprint ceremonies and all that, right? The product manager is not supposed to concern himself with that, right? So I just wanted to put that out there. So core roles, product owner, Scrum Master, and development team. Then the non-core roles are basically the stakeholders. By stakeholders, I mean investors. Here it's sponsors, but same thing. Sponsors or investors, management team, users, and also your third-party API providers. They are the vendors. Yeah. So I'm going to dive into the core roles and the non-core roles. So this is basically for people that really do not have great idea on what Scrum is. I just thought to really take out my time to explain what each role is about, and yeah, just deep dive a bit into what Scrum is really about. So product owners are responsible for achieving maximum business value for the project, right? They are basically the ones with the sole responsibility of giving the business a return on its investment. They articulate customer requirements. Like I said, they are the voice of the users. They maintain business justification, customer's voice, responsible for the product success by defining the project's vision, requirements, and prioritization or priorities, any way you want to call it. They're responsible for managing the product backlog. The product owner has to be willing to make the hard choices during a sprint planning session. Now, the product owner, note that the product owner has to resist the temptation to manage the team or add more important work after a sprint has gone. So for my team, if it's not a hot fix, nothing is entering my sprint, please. My team's velocity has to be defined. Nothing is entering my sprint, except there is an engineer that actually doesn't have any task he's working on. Then maybe he can take up that task, right? But if all my engineers are actually working on something we've already defined from the set goal, from the get-go, nothing is going into my sprint, except the hot fix. Why is this so? Because you do not want to overwork your engineers. You do not want to overwork your engineers. Why? Because if your engineers are, how you even know that your engineers are overworked is when they're always going on leave at the same time, when they want to all go on leave at the same time, or when they're all falling sick at the same time. At that point, you already know that your engineers are actually overworked. Why? Because you keep pumping in things into your sprint. And before the sprint is supposed to start, like during the sprint planning, when you're about to click start, you're already supposed to calculate your team's velocity. Now, if the sprint is, if the accumulated velocity that you're seeing there is above the team's velocity, at that point, you're meant to reach out to the product owner, please, which tasks should we take down? Which tasks should we deprioritize so that we're not overworking them? Except if the engineer decides on his own that he can actually work on all the tasks that is actually in the sprint, then that's fine. But you're not meant to overwork your engineers. This is actually going to decrease the motivation in the team, right? And then you start seeing your engineers already resigning. You have to be very careful about how tasks or how you add tasks to your sprint. All right, so the Scrum Master is the next role we're going to be looking at for. So the Scrum Master ensures that the Scrum team is provided with an environment conducive to complete the project successfully, right? A Scrum Master guides, facilitates, and teaches the Scrum practices to everyone involved in the project. A Scrum Master's main role is to clear impediments for the team, right? Both internal blockers and external blockers. It's your sole responsibility to clear the blockers your team is having in the sprint. Now, the Scrum Master ensures that Scrum processes are being followed, assists the development team and the product owner where necessary. The Scrum Master works with the product owner to maximize ROI, return on investment. All right, so the development team, they're responsible for understanding the product owner's specified requirements, create the project deliverables, usually comprised of a team of 5 to 9 members with different expertise. When I mean different expertise, in your team, you can have like back-end engineers, front-end engineers, mobile engineers, QA testers, DevOps guys. But DevOps guys are really not in a Scrum team. They work on their own, right? But a Scrum team, a development team rather, is commonly made of back-end engineers, front-end engineers, mobile engineers, QA testers, right? So note that this team has the autonomy to self-organize and choose how best to meet the goal of the product owner, and is responsible for the same under the guidance of the Scrum Master. Now, this part alone is what is actually going to improve collaboration in your team. Like we said, this part alone is going to improve collaboration in your team, because a Scrum team is supposed to be self-organized, right? They're not meant to be micromanaged. You're meant to coach your Scrum team and mentor your Scrum team to the point that they are actually self-organizing. All right, so I'm going to go over to the non-core roles where we have the stakeholders. This is basically CEOs, C-suites, investors, and they frequently interface with the Scrum core team and influence the project throughout the project development cycle. where your CEO is trying to get feedback on what is happening with the product, where are you guys on ETAs and all that. And the vendors are basically third-party APIs that you're using or integrating into your product. Now, the second impact Scrum has on product teams is increased productivity. Whether you like it or not, this is true, right? So Scrum promotes a collaborative and iterative approach to development by breaking down work into smaller, manageable increments called sprints. Sprints could go for like 2 weeks to 4 weeks. 4 weeks is a month, 2 weeks is half a month, right? By breaking down work into smaller manageable increments called sprints, teams can focus on delivering high value features within short time frames. Now, this iterative process combined with regular feedback loops from users or stakeholders helps increase productivity and ensures that the team is consistently delivering incremental value, right? So when you're always retrospecting on what you've worked on in the previous sprint and improving on it on actionable plans you all agreed during the retrospective session, as you go on, as you keep iterating that process, as you keep repeating that process, you find out that your team becomes more productive, right? However, there are processes that aid this increase in productivity, and we're going to be talking about them now in the next slide. So yes, Scrum processes. The first Scrum process is the initiation phase. This is basically the phase where the core and non-core roles meet. Basically, in this, let me use an example. This is basically where the CEO meets with the product team, and he's giving the product team his goals, his vision of the product, the business case, and what he wants the product to achieve, what the vision of the product is, what the goal of the product is, and all that. And then the product manager takes it in, does his research, does his bits, market research, draws up his documentation, his PRD, and all that. And that takes us to the next phase, which is plan and estimate, right? Here, the user stories are, the epics are broken down into user stories. We have two backlogs. We have the product backlog and we have the sprint backlog. So the product backlog is basically where the product owner breaks down his or her epics into user stories, right? And then the sprint backlog is what embodies the prioritized user stories from the product backlog, right? So it is during a backlog grooming session that the product manager, with the help of the Scrum Master, the product owner, with the help of the Scrum Master, prioritizes, takes user stories from the product backlog and prioritizes it on the sprint backlog, right? That is what the engineers are actually going to work on in the coming sprint after it has been prioritized, right? So here we have user stories and their related user story acceptance criteria created by the product owner and kept in the product backlog. Like I said, stories to be committed to the sprint are then moved to the sprint backlog and estimated by the development team during the sprint planning session with guidance from the Scrum Master. So yeah, I have sorry, but I use the most popular story point estimation that most fintechs use, which is called a Fibonacci estimation sequence. Story points. Okay, so let me define what story points is. It's a unit of measure that expresses the relative complexity between pieces of work, right? So story point estimates are 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, and it goes on. A little hack for those of us that actually need to cram this. You don't need to cram this. Our developers that need to cram this, or Scrum Masters that are not still used to this Fibonacci sequence of estimation, all you need to do is, this is 1, right? Just add the previous to the next and you get the next. So 1 plus 1 is 2, 2 plus the previous, which is 1, is 3, 3 plus 2 is 5, 5 plus 3 is 8, 8 plus 5 is 13. This is what actually helps my engineers to know the next story points that exist, because most of our engineers actually make mistakes and they are estimating 7 to a user story, and I'm like, 7 doesn't exist. They're estimating 4, and I'm like, it doesn't exist. So as a Scrum Master, it is actually your role to actually coach your team to understand everything they need to understand about Scrum, And this is one thing they need to understand. You can actually teach them as well what I just said now on how to remember these story points, because sometimes they forget the next number. All right, so the third process is implementing the implementation phase. This is where the engineers, work on their deliverables that have been assigned to them or that they've picked up during the sprint planning session, and Scrum Master, logs the impediments in an impediment log. An impediment is a blocker, by the way. So number 4 is review and retrospect, right? The Scrum team demonstrates so a review session is where, I'm still going to talk about this in the coming slides, but let me just brush over it here. A review session is where where the Scrum team comes together and the product owner demos what has been done at the end of that sprint, right? And goes through, if it was something that if they were working on a KYC verification page, that is where the product owner demos that whole flow. And if there are things that do not meet his or our definition of done, the engineer takes it down and the product owner takes it down and then adds it into the backlog, the next sprint's backlog, for the engineer to actually work on it, right? So are you seeing where these improvements are already slowly coming in, right? So you're working on something, your engineer has worked on it, you're having a demo session, and you're already seeing some inconsistencies that were not part of the ACT. Some of your acceptance, ACT, I'm sorry, sometimes I use without defining. So ACT is called acceptance criteria, right? So every user story has its definition and its acceptance criteria written down in plain terms by the product manager on each user story. So when an engineer just, for example, you're using Jira, and an engineer just opens a particular user story, he sees everything that he's meant to work on, both the definition, the acceptance criteria, the Figma link is already attached, the API doc, everything is already attached in the user story, right? So during the sprint review session, which is a demo session, if there is anything that doesn't meet the DOD, definition of done, of the product owner, the product owner will take note of it and then add it to the product backlog for the next sprint. So now after the sprint review session is the retrospective session, where the whole team comes, and there's a lot of dragging most times. I usually always like the sprint retrospective sessions because this is where your engineers get to call out the product manager and call out the Scrum Master where necessary. This is where the product manager calls out the Scrum Master, or the Scrum Master calls out the product, not in an aggressive way. What I mean is, I'm sorry, but what I mean is, this is where the team gets to pour out their mind. Because at this point, you're talking about what went well in the last sprint, what did not go well, what should we improve on, what did we do that we should continue doing, right? Like I have here, what worked well, what could be improved on, what will we commit to doing in the next sprint, right? And so those actionable suggestions that, okay, for example, now an engineer comes and says, I did not like the fact that the PM was always adding tasks for me during the sprint. I had other tasks to do, and you adding tasks to me was actually, too much for me to bear. And don't forget that I have opt fixes to work on. I have to review other people's PRs. I have to do this. And he's already complaining, he's already bitter. He's showing you how bitter he is, right? As a Scrum Master, you're meant to take note of that. And you're meant to find a common ground where you guys take action points that you're going to implement in the next sprint that will curb this frustration of this engineer. Or another example could be an engineer comes and is complaining that I think there was one case in my team whereby an engineer or few engineers were complaining about the fact that when the sprint starts, the sprint planning session is where the product manager is actually meant to, give details of what the user stories are about and explain to the development team for them to ask their questions and get clarity on what they're going to work on, right? So now, as the sprint has started, they were actually using, let's say, 3 or 4 days in the sprint to actually do research on how they want to actually, work on that task. And they're coming to you during the retrospective session and they're saying, look, I couldn't finish my task in the sprint because I had to use so and so days to do proper research and find a way of implementing this stuff that we had to work on, blah, blah, blah. And in that session, everybody is meant to agree on an approach that will actually work best for both the product team and the engineering team, right? If you need to add, before the sprint starts, if you need to add like 3 days for the engineers to use to proper plan their sprints or the tasks that have been assigned to them in the sprint, you can actually do that, right? Basically, retrospective is where you're actually getting feedback from both the product manager, you yourself has feedback if need be, the engineering team, they're giving feedback. This is what I did not like, this is what I like, this is what we should do, this, and you guys are actually having action points to implement in the next sprint. And you find out that when those action points are implemented in the next sprint, the retrospective, it's a whole new it's a whole new problems they would be having, right? And it comes like that. It keeps coming like that. It keeps coming like that till you get to a point whereby you're asking your engineers what went well, and they tell you everything that went well. You're asking your engineers what did not go well. They're telling you everything went well, nothing did not go well. My Scrum team has gotten to the point whereby I think for the previous 5 retrospectives, all my engineers are telling me everything went well, everything went well. And I'm like, is it that they are not being open to me anymore, or is it that we've gotten to a point whereby our Scrum process is stable, is 100% stable, everybody is comfortable with the processes we have in place? So I think my Scrum team has gotten to a point whereby everything is stable, right? So you would hear your engineers are saying, when you ask them what went well, they're telling you communication, collaboration, the QA team did this, the QA team did that, I like that about them, the PM did this, kudos, and they call the PM's name, the Scrum Master did this, everything went well, everybody in a team of 9, everybody is saying everything went well. Then it means that the product, the retrospectives we've been having over time and the action points we've actually implemented has gotten your team to a stable ground. And I'm not saying that there is not going to be a time whereby something might happen and your engineers would not have a complaint or have a feedback to give you during a retrospective session. There would be a time whereby at least 1 or 2 engineers, even when you've gotten your processes to a stable ground, there'll still be a time whereby your engineers would, oh, this, I did not like what this person did. This API wasn't working well. This wasn't doing this, So one important value that retrospectives add to the Scrum processes is the fact that you always get to retrospect and improve on what you did not do well in the previous sprints. I think I have really stayed too long on this slide, so I don't have time. Let me move. Wow. Blessing, please, how many minutes do I have left?
You have 7.
Wow. Okay, so I'm just going to run. All right, so after the review and retrospective is the release phase. I could actually drop the slides for us to really go through it. So we have enhanced transparency. So Scrum, another impact of Scrum on product teams is transparency, right? Everybody gets to see what everybody's working on, right? Just like the retrospect I talked about, everybody hears what's happening in the team, the sprint board, everybody sees what everybody's working on. The stakeholders get to see the burn down chart as the sprint is ongoing. So yeah, we have Scrum events, sprint planning, like I mentioned previously, where the product owner brings the prioritized backlog and the engineers, pick up the tasks that they want to. And one thing we need to understand is that the product owner or the product manager or the Scrum Master have no right to assign a task to an engineer. The engineer is actually meant to pick up a task that they feel they can work on. The only person that can actually assign a task to an engineer is the engineering manager or the head of engineering. Now, another Scrum event is daily stand-up. Now, this is always a time box. A sprint plan is a time box meeting, actually. It's a 2-hour meeting. A daily stand-up is a box meeting. It's a 15-minute box meeting where everybody comes and the engineers, give their updates, what they worked on the previous day, what they're working on today, and what their blockers are. It's at that meeting that the Scrum Master actually takes these impediments that have been given or that have been said by the engineers and tries to resolve or facilitate the removal of those blockers or those impediments. Now, after the sprint has ended, after the 2-week sprints or the 1-month sprints have ended, they now go to the review. I think this is where I really spend time on sprint review, where they have a demo and show what was worked on. And if it doesn't meet the DOD, the product owner adds it to the backlog for the next sprint. And then retrospective, I touched base on this. All right. So now the fourth impact Scrum has on product teams is adaptability to change. Like I said in the beginning, Scrum embraces change. You can always get feedback from users and add it to your product backlog and then prioritize it, right? And Scrum embraces change as a natural part of the development process through the use of short sprints. Teams can quickly respond to new requirements, like I said about the Bitcoin or crypto ban in Nigeria. You know, if they were already looking at opening a crypto company or building a crypto product, and that happens, they will already, look for ways to change the scope of the product. And the next one is improvement, continuous improvement. Like I said, when you use Scrum, you get to a point whereby your team is stable, the code base, the codes written by your engineers are actually quality codes, because so this is the kind of board we have in my company. To do, moves to in progress, from in progress to code review, from code review to QA testing, and then the PM could test or not test, and then move to done. So for every task, before it moves to done or PM test, the QA has to test. So that is where there's usually a lot of back and forth. QA will test the APIs or test the functionality of the feature that was being worked on. There's a lot of back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. That is how you actually improve the quality of the codes that you guys are actually pushing out to the market. All right. So the next one is customer satisfaction. Now, Scrum places a strong emphasis on delivering value to the user. Like I said in the other slides, the product owner representing the customer or stakeholder actively participates in backlog refinements, sprint reviews, ensuring that the team is building the right product by involving the customer throughout the development process and continuously delivering working software, right? Now, by embracing all these 6 principles I've talked about, these 6 practices, teams can deliver high quality products that meet customer needs in a more efficient and effective manner. Now, this is the last thing we're going to talk about: implementing Scrum correctly. For those of us that already know what Scrum is and are already using Scrum. Now, first of all, you need to educate and train your team. For times where you find yourself in a team that isn't using Scrum, you need to educate and train your team on Scrum principles, make them understand what Scrum is really about. If you can even set up Scrum trainings for them or workshops to have a fundamental knowledge or foundation, or to have a foundation of knowledge on what Scrum is about, that would be good. Now, the second one is to formulate a clear vision, clear product vision that outlines the purpose and goals of the product. Now, the third one is to establish the Scrum team. You need to create a self-organizing, cross-functional Scrum team consisting of dedicated individuals with the necessary skills to deliver the product. Once you get this number 3 right, you'd have seamless product development phases. Now, the fourth one is develop the product backlog, right? With the help of the Scrum Master, you'll be able to prioritize the backlog properly to align with what you're working with. Now, plan the sprint. Like I said, the sprint planning, meetings, and all that. Sixth one is execute the sprint, which takes 2 weeks or 4 weeks. Monitors the progress and adapt. That is, track the progress of the sprint using a visual board, such as a Scrum board or a Kanban board. In this case, a Scrum board. Jira can give you a Scrum board, and Jira can also give you a Kanban board, right? To provide transparency where everybody gets to see what everybody's working on, right? Regularly review the sprint progress in daily stand-ups and address any impediments or issues that arise. Number 8, conduct the sprint review and retrospective. I talked about what these two are about. Repeat the cycle, which is iterate. And you'd see that there's progress in your team. Now, start a new sprint by going back to step 5, refine the backlog, like I talked about. So it's just an iterative process. And number 10, very important, please support continuous learning. Encourage a culture of continuous learning and improvement within the Scrum team. Provide opportunities for knowledge sharing, experimentation, and professional development. Yeah. So note that implementing Scrum correctly is an ongoing process that requires commitment, flexibility, and a willingness to adapt. Regularly review and refine your Scrum practice to optimize the team's performance and maximize the value delivered to the users. I think this is the point where you ask me questions. Bless, am I on time?
Yes, you are. You are on time.
Oh, thank God. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. Guys,
I can actually provide the slides. I can actually provide the slides if anyone wants them.
Okay, great. I think one of myself or Banji will reach out to you so you can get the slides. Thank you so much for this really explanatory session. I mean, you broke everything down with practical examples, and it makes sense. Yeah, guys, do we have questions for Esther? Let's ask her questions now. She has delivered. She has delivered. So it's time for us to ask questions. Do we have questions? Do we want to be clear on something, or is something not clear in the things that she has said or mentioned? Let's just ask questions. You can raise your hand if you have questions.
Okay, I think I'm seeing some in the chat session.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
How can one be a Scrum Master? Do we need a special class?
Okay. Blessing, I think your network cut you off. Are you there? All right. So someone said, how can one be a Scrum Master? Do we need special class or program? Yes, you need to get really. Scrum is actually not that. For starters, you need to actually have a good foundation on what Scrum is really about. So you need to take some courses. There are courses you need to take. I would recommend for starters, there are 3 courses you can take. I would recommend Agile Scrum Master from Simply Learn. Simply Learn is spelled SIMPLILERN. You can learn the baby steps of Scrum there. They'll break it down to simple forms for you. And then from there, you can also go on to learn from Scrum Fundamental Certified from Scrum Study. I think these are the 2 free ones I know about. There are other ones, maybe Blessing can also recommend as well. But there are certifications you can actually get. But then for you to be internationally recognized, or for your certifications to be internationally recognized, you need to be certified. You need to take courses that has CSM. CSM is Certified Scrum Master, PSM1, PSM2. So those certifications are internationally recognized. If you want to, do abroad gigs, right, in Scrum, there are lots of Scrum. I believe that Scrum is actually hot cake outside the country. Most Nigerian companies are not really aware of what or the impact of Scrum or the extent to how Scrum can actually be very valuable for your product. So you can take CSM certifications, PSM1, PSM2, they're all paid, right? But it's really do you good. The next person said, Scrum Master. Yes, a product manager can actually transition into a Scrum Master. And a Scrum Master can transition into a product at the beginning of this year into a product manager. So it's a great, amazing journey. I feel like every product manager should actually know Scrum because it will actually help them, because it's not all teams that have Scrum Masters. So you can actually, be a Scrum Master for your team and still be a product owner or a product manager, right? So if you have Scrum skills as a product manager, it's an additional value to you and your team, you guys will always can you please respell what you just said? Oh, I think Omotola just helped me out with that. Guys, do you have any other questions, please? Any other questions?
Guys. Other questions?
I think there was someone that said, yeah. Let me just type the course, Agile Scrum Master. Faith, yeah. Faith Ogundara.
Hey, good evening. Please, can you hear me?
Yes, please, I can hear you.
All right. Thank you very much for the section today. Thank you so much. So I have a question. So in a team whereby the design is going on with the sprint, so the designs are not ready. So the designer is designing and the developers are working. Do you understand? So if you want to start a sprint, are you supposed to have your designs ready before you say you want to start a sprint? Or is design supposed to be part of a sprint? Because I know some teams, designs are not ready before they even say you have to start work and you have to start implementing starting sprint already. So how do you go about that if you're in such a team and that designs are not ready and then you need to start working already?
Thank you very much. Your team will never finish their tasks in the sprint. Just trust me on that one. No matter what you do, they will never. So this is part of the reason why a retrospective is actually very important, in the sense that things like this will come up at the retrospective point, whereby engineers are complaining, oh, the design was not ready, that's why I did not complete my task, blah, blah, blah. And then your team agrees on what's going to work for them. For my team, before the sprint planning session, the documentations have to be ready, the designs in its entirety, as it pertains to that user story, has to be ready. Every single information the engineers need for that task, the API documentation, everything has to be ready before the sprint starts. If not, it's not going into the sprint, so go into the next sprint. So as a PM, the PM already knows the processes you have in place, right? So the PM already, after or during even before the backlog grooming session. So for my team, the backlog grooming session happens when the sprint is already halfway. This backlog grooming session is for the next sprint. We're prioritizing what we're working on in the next sprint, right? So once the sprint is already a week, we have our backlog grooming session. So once the sprint starts, right, the PMs are already working on the tasks for the next sprint. The designs are already being, worked on. The documentations are already being set, PRDs and everything. So during that backlog grooming session, everything is ready during that backlog grooming session. So if has to give the Scrum Master an ETA of when it be ready, but it has to be an ETA before the sprint planning session. If not, that task is not going into the sprint. So by the time you have processes in place for your team, you find out that everything is actually effective. So yeah, I think, Faith, that answers your question, right? Faith, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
You're muted.
Yes, it does. Thank you.
All right, you're welcome. Any other question, guys? Let me check.
All right, guys.
Okay, do you think the PM role? Yeah, I see a question in the chat session. Do you think the PM role is more relevant than the Scrum role? Guys, a product manager role and a Scrum Master role are two entirely different things. They are both relevant, right? I wouldn't say a PM role is more relevant than a Scrum Master role, right? They both have, it's just like you saying, do you think a PM is relevant than a product designer role? Everybody, it's just like you're saying, do you think my hand is more important than my head? Right? Everybody works together. Everybody has the value that they're bringing to the team, right? So just as relevant as a PM is, a product owner is, a Scrum Master is actually relevant too, in terms of, meeting deadlines from stakeholders. And if you have a Scrum Master in your team, you're not bothered about pursuing engineers. The Scrum Masters work every morning. We call Scrum Masters police officers or Scrum police. Yeah, Omotola, your hand is raised.
Hi, Esther. Yes, so my hand is raised because I don't have the right word to put the question. So let me just say it let me just speak. So,
Anyhow you put it, it's
okay,
fine.
so I tried to do Scrum before, but I realized that in Nigeria, we don't really have Scrum roles as much as the PM roles. And in fact, most of the PM roles, they would expect that you have the Scrum skill set. So what do you think about that?
Okay, so what you're saying is actually true. You will hardly find companies that would want to employ you as a beginner because you're going to be a headache. Why am I saying that? Someone that only has the knowledge of Scrum but doesn't have the experience. So Scrum textbook, what you're learning when you take these certifications is slightly different from the application because now you're dealing with real human beings. And we all know how strong-headed engineers can be, right? So you have to know how to, that is where your people management skills come in, how to tap into their emotional bank and all that. So like you said, it's really hard for a beginner in Scrum to actually get a role. So it's best for you to transition in a company that you're already in, right? It's skill set you actually even want to even transition into. It's same for PM. You hardly find associate product manager roles, right? So for any skill set you actually want to transition into, it is best to actually start in the company you are in. It doesn't matter if you are in the topmost level, like you're in like a senior level. If you know you want to actually move career paths, right? You have to be courageous enough to start another career path from the lowest level up, right? So I don't know, but there are some that rule that. So I think what some of my friends do is they take a lot of courses, and some of their friends that are Scrum Masters, they get to have sessions with them. To actually help them to have experience. Management role can actually do is if you have friends that are Scrum Masters, or you can make connections on LinkedIn, right? Try and have a lot of sessions with already experienced Scrum Masters, right? Let them show you how Jira works, because that is one major tool a lot of companies use, right? I rarely see companies that use Trello or ClickUp. Jira will give you everything you need, right? So try and make friends with people that are Scrum Masters, make connections on LinkedIn, have sessions with them. If you can take them out for a drink, tap into their emotional bank, let them, show you how this Scrum thing is done. The way I'm talking to you now, let them give you some of their experiences. Now, those experiences they are giving you, when you go for interviews and they ask you situational based questions, you can actually use the experiences they have given you, right? There are stories that will never leave your head. You can actually use it to formulate your own story, because they will ask you questions like, when this happened in your team, how did you work around it? When you had an external blocker, how did you work around it? What was your solution? What did you do? You need to know how to answer situational based questions. Even if you don't have an experience, I feel you can still land a Scrum Master role, to be very honest. But the best bet is transitioning. But then if you're someone that is really, really smart, you can still land the role. All you need to do is know how to answer situational questions, because those are the only questions they will ask you in a Scrum interview. Right? You need to understand Scrum to the point that no matter the questions they throw at you, you can formulate a story in your head immediately and answer it there and then. And you've landed the role. And then if it's not situational based, you should already have a friend that has showed you what Jira looks like. And even get Jira for yourself, the free version, play around with it, assign tasks to yourself, assign tasks to your brother, your sister. Just play around with it, play around velocity charts, one down charts. I think it's quite easy. It's quite easy for you to learn a role. You just have to be very smart about it if you don't have an experience, right? But then the best bet, if you're already in a tech firm, you can transition easily. I think that answers your question, Omotala. I don't know. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Esther. Yes, you will. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, guys. We've come to the end of the session. Thank you so much, Esther, for this awesome session. And
Thank you.